So now what I'll do is introduce David Kidder. David, I'm not sure where you went. Why don't you come on up? So David is kind of a serial entrepreneur. He has a number of different companies he has started in the last couple decades, a number of successful exits, including Clickable. He's now also an angel investor, and most recently, the author of the StartUp Playbook. And this is a very interesting book. If you have not got the chance to pick it up and read it, lots of different dynamics of startups, everything from seeking funding to product development to organizational issues and culture, and how all that changes as you go through many stages of an organization. And it's really set around a number of vignettes with leaders in the space, Tony Hsieh at Zappos, Reid Hoffman from Greylock and LinkedIn. The list goes on and on. Elon Musk from Tesla. So David, I'll let you get right into it. You have your slides loaded up, I believe, and I'll join you back on stage after your presentation. So please join me in welcoming David.
Thanks. So we had to switch up the deck, so hopefully most of the graphics can work. Thanks for having me, I appreciate it. I know you guys are probably having major conference fatigue, so hopefully this will be a bit of a tangent from all the techno stuff we've been talking about, and having lived in that space for the last 15 years. It's good to take a break sometimes. So this is a project I started about 3.5 years ago. I've been building digital startups for 15 years and had done 4 back-to-back of various outcomes, from 10 to 50 to 250 to 0 failure to all sorts of crazy outcomes. And I wanted to always know, what is the difference? What's the difference between one outcome and a billion-dollar outcome? You want to know what the prisms are that some entrepreneurs view the world through that you need to. It's the Gladwellian 10,000 hours. And so I set out to go get the answer. And when you're building a startup, it's like you're building your little movie, You get to do one movie at a time, okay? And if you're an investor, you get to watch, 100 movies in your lifetime. You can invest in a lot of things, and that's a huge contextual advantage. And so whether you're, building a large company or a product, or as Jeff Immelt said last week in his 2012 annual shareholder letter, he mentioned this book as something it's really changing their culture as well. And so hopefully some of the things we'll share today will kind of help lead you through this. This is kind of what it's like to build a company, a startup. It's like eating glass for long periods of time. And there's this idea that Seth Godin said called the dips, which is you go out and you start your company and you raise tons of money or a little bit of money, and then you go through long periods where you just have to figure it out, right? It's product to market fit, it's pricing, it's things breaking, it's sales, all the tools and things that actually make it work. That's where you spend most of your time. And so from the outside, it looks sexy and cool, but on the inside, it's just pain. And you guys all know this. And so this journey, as I was sharing, was actually to go out and learn the difference. And so I did about 45 interviews over a period of 3 years when I was on the road, all one-on-one, on video with some of the best people in the world. And what it came up with were lenses, right? Views, ideology, philosophy, as much as it was practical guidance. And it was 2 questions. What are those lenses that you view the world through, by which if you were to pick an idea to bet your life on it, it would have to pass through? It's the criteria, right? And the second thing is, what do you do in the first 5 years not to die? And so I went out and talked to a lot of friends I've known for many, many years, from the Tony Hsiehs of the world to Peter Thiel, who was a previous investor of mine, Reid Hoffman, who wrote the foreword of the book, Elon Musk, probably the greatest living entrepreneur today, to friends like Mark Ecko, who went from 0 to 1.6 billion in revenue and down and back again, who'd had incredible experiences, to Sarah Blakely, the founder of Spanx, the second self-made billionaire woman in the world. Also nonprofits like Scott Harrison of Charity Water and Jacqueline Novogratz of the Acumen Fund. So I want to get a full perspective on these lenses. And it's got some really good feedback from the marketplace, and it's doing well. Just a little bit about my background. I've had 4 companies in the last 18 years. 10, 50, 250, who knows, active exits. I just started another company again. It's like a career path. I always jokingly say that the people in my book are sort of like the Brad Pitts of the space, and I'm in this Steve Buscemi life. I just keep building and trying to figure it out. I got 3 little boys, and I've written about 6 books over the years, and I do about 15 deals a year investor. That's little Lucas, he's 2. I'm also in the board of the Smithsonian and Acumen Fund and Endeavor. So if you're involved in those type of things, I just put it up there because those are things I'm really excited about. So if you care about those things, see me. So you're probably asking, just cut to the chase. Like, tell me, what did you learn, right? 300 hours, it's the best living entrepreneurs. What actually are the secrets? And so this is the answers, and it'll surprise you, hopefully. So the first thing is innate. And this is a question you would ask yourself or you'd ask your company. What are we truly innately gifted to do? What if we weren't chasing white space and bolting on features, what would be the thing that is in our nature that no one else in the world can actually produce? And that innate gift is actually the power of the company. It's following the rabbit holes. It's quitting the weaknesses. It's actually cutting off optionality because it dilutes focus and it hijacks this one gift of innate. And so you need to know thyself, right? So if you're not good at things, don't do them, right? Don't pursue sports, and don't pursue acting, and don't pursue the music career you thought you were good at as a company. And don't pursue, if you're not good at technology, don't do technology, right? Okay? But do things that you are gifted at doing, and you got to be smart, okay? What are we truly gifted and smart at doing? I love that slide. That is actually a real slide. It's a real moment in time. So number 2 is extreme focus. So this is actually incredibly hard to do because you're going to be under a great deal of pressure, whether you're a big company, small company, startup, if you have lots of money. What actually can we have extreme focus in doing, right? We're not going to do 50 things. We're not going to do 50 partnerships. We're not going to chase every marketplace. We're going to quit things. But that courage to bet it all on the innate gift and the focus actually leads you to a higher probable and bigger outcome. Number 3, this is kind of a common lexicon in the VC world, but build painkillers, not vitamins. Any vitamins are things that are elective, things that people like to do when they feel good about themselves and they stop doing, right? You got to focus on, things that are chronic fatigue, chronic pain, not just the cancers where your patient dies, which is a sad thing, but it can happen. Things that are always on, always a drug that actually is dealing with chronic pain. And it's a very important lens to view through because it also tells you who ultimately your customer is. Is it really the end SMB, or is it truly the enablers in the marketplace around them? Are you B to C to B or B to B to C? And the question is really who is going to give us economic oxygen that's always going to be on? Number 4. I love that picture, but that's Eddie Murphy at like 2 stories. The point is that whatever you do that's innately you, that's under extreme focus, that's a painkiller, you gotta be 10 times better than anyone else in the world, okay? 10x. You can't just be 1x, you can't be incrementally better than your competitors because that literally is a path to nowhere. Can you really build a huge scaling business on top of someone else's monopoly, i.e. Google or Facebook? What can you own as a whole cohort, as a whole business that you control all the pieces, that's your magical box, okay? This incrementalism idea means that if you're in a box with features with your competitors and you all look the same and you have little these famous feature boxes, which I've had companies that live in it, you literally are almost walking dead. You're not going to create enough economic oxygen that's sustainable, that's meaningful, that's defensible, that's 10 times better to create a real business. So why do it? And that's a very high demanding question you need to ask your product and your culture and your CEOs, which is, can we build things that are truly gifted in us that are 10 times better? Because this last part is one of the most important aspects of these 5 rules, and that is you need to think like a monopolist from day one. What actually creates monopolies? Monopolies are things where you put your organ in someone's body and you start rewiring blood vessels through it from day one, implicitly and explicitly. So if someone takes you out, they die. They literally die. Or they're so in love with you, they gouge their eyes out because they can't live without you. And that's a very important lens, is what is it about what we do that's monopolistic, intentionally? That when we create it, we put it someone in, we start moving things around, they cannot function without us. It's not just the automatic debit card that the money comes to us. It needs to be a high-functioning organ in their life. And these prisms, these 5 things, focus, innate, focus, painkillers are 10 times better monopolies. These lenses are the same common stories amongst the greatest living entrepreneurs, whether they're career actors like myself or they're Elon Musk. It's the same story over and over and over and over again. And it is the reason why they so have radically differentiated their lives. So let's meet a couple of them. So you guys, I don't know if you guys know Jawbone, but this is one of my favorite companies. These guys are like total ballers. They've been around for 12 years out of Stanford. They've pivoted like 4 times. They've raised like $140 million. They've lived all the dips, all the glass-eating dips you can imagine. But if you know their products, they have such an incredible goodwill with their customers that they can release things like that little Jawbone Up that was a complete failure 2 years ago and re-release it. But that's part of their philosophy, is that everything we have is a prototype. We have a beta culture. We have a beta relationship with our customers. They trust us because they know that no one else in the world will experiment and try things and take risks with them. But that's part of what makes them monopolistic in their life, is because that's the relationship. Number 3 is I love the idea of them, always keeping the taste of dirt and blood in their mouth. They don't let today's home run, or yesterday's home run, win today's game. TED founder Chris Anderson is a good friend, been going there for about 9 years now. You wonder kind of what the magic of TED is, and you realize when you spend time with Chris is how brilliant he is at this, which is, I think this is the marketing stage that we're all on, right? We're building companies, little companies in the local space, they're in a story war, right, in their local neighborhood. It's whether it's word of mouth or it's reputation. They're in the war where they need people to say, tell them I sent you. And in a way, we're kind of in the tell them I sent you business. And how does he do that, right? He does that by understanding that proxies passion is a proxy for potential. How do we create little stages? How do we actually use people's passion in their areas to actually set that stage where it happens on those customers' brand, their stories? And he loves the idea of building a broadly appealed niche. I mean, the local space has every niche in the world, but how does your platform, how does your company be the stage where those things are expressed off of? Reed is kind of the Don of the Valley in a lot of ways. He is the nexus by which almost all the major deals flow through now. But I would just say that he was one of the contributors to the second idea about executing your biggest idea. If you chase 50 things and 50 outcomes, you're going to dilute your attention, your team's focus, because the cycles in which we sleep and think about ideas are actually where the solutions come out of. And so if you're focusing on 5, 10, 15 things, very difficult to have someone's whole mind and whole life come to a full conclusion on that. And so do fewer things and execute on them in a bigger way. And be a radical outsider. I was part of the local digital marketing space for a couple of years with a big partnership with Amex. And it was amazing how much time you could spend kind of in the inside of the marketplace, kind of rubbing small comparative statistics together. And the reality is that the biggest advantage you had was to be a radical outsider, is to be something that was not of the center, where new metrics and new ideas were being formed, and not in the center. And how do you do that? It's an important question. Elon, none of us are Elon. Very few of us have think about things like impact the future of humanity, who, he believes in his lifetime, and I wouldn't bet against him, he's going to die on Mars, right? The third point that he makes is very critical, and the rest you can read if you want to, which is never engage in wishful thinking. And as operating, investors and CEOs in this audience, the things that move through your company should not really surprise you. And as they move up through the organization, if they do surprise you, you have to think, how much do my sleeves rolled up? How much am I engaged in my business where those things are surprising me? And what I like about what he says is never engage in wishful thinking, which is, what he's saying is that you really have to have a trust but verify belief as founders, as creators, that you are on the ground building things and you are not kind of just doing your job and letting the rest, happen. I hired the right people, I spent the money, I built the product, and there it goes. I've done my job. It really doesn't work that way. You need to be on the ground, sleeves up, verifying and building and not crossing your fingers. And where you are crossing your fingers is the biggest business risks. Steve Blank, has anybody read his book, The 4 Steps to the Epiphany? So, 1. Okay. I honest to God would think, if I walked out, if there's one thing I could ask of you is to, when you leave here today, go buy his book on Amazon. It's self-published. It's the Bible of the kind of the valley, and it describes you in incredibly gritty detail how to scale a mass market company. And if for anybody needs to know that, we need to know that, right? And this book is incredible. It's so entrepreneurial, but it actually learns and teaches how to segment and what aspects of segmentation actually work. because he looks at the history and does it. So it's called the 4 Steps of Epiphany. I cannot recommend it more highly. What he says is that one is that entrepreneurship can be taught. Entrepreneurship, let's just call it what it is. You're builders or creators of things, but you can learn it, and this is a great kind of tool for that. What he says at the end, though, is really powerful, which is for a company to be successful, or a product, or division launch, it actually flows in this order, in this permanent order, from you to your team to the marketplace. You, your team, to your marketplace. You, your team, to the marketplace. It's an axle, right? Which kind of goes back to like the trust but verify part, why you cannot engage in wishful thinking, because if it's not true, right, it won't be true to your team, and it won't be true to the marketplace in that order. And when you actually go to sleep at night and you're thinking about your business as a founder, if that's wrong, the business won't work. And you can't be a good steward or a good leader, so to speak, in these businesses unless that first part is correct. And this isn't wishful thinking. This is to be true at a data level, has to be true at a conviction level. This is the last profile, but there's over 40 of these, but they're really phenomenal. But I love what Jay Walker tells here in this story. There's 2 things I love, well, all of them, but as Americans, and I'm totally guilty of this, we love to make progress, right? The hard work, the all-nighters, spending the money, moving the ball forward, and but we often are guilty of like kind of ready, fire, aim. The distance we move is sort of sideline to sideline. And he's a very special guy because he's one of the greatest living patent holders today. He's sort of our living Thomas Edison, literally. He works in this kind of like space UFO up in Stanford. He lives in Ridgefield. And he thinks about things for a long period of time. But we don't always have that luxury. But he does emphasize that it's important to aim, ready, fire. You don't have a lot of shots on goal. And when you do take them, they got to be worthwhile because they take so long for the data to come out. And so be thoughtful about it. And recognize the complexity in all things. Products are not hard. Markets are hard. People are hard. That's really what business we're in. Stages with people on them. This is his library, just to show you his vision. I just stuck these in here. It's the largest private library in the U.S. I've been here a couple of times. It's unbelievable. It cost a mere $100 million to build. And he sits on the second floor, suspended floor, and thinks, okay? And he collects things. And he collects like the Gutenberg Bible, and he's got Enigma, and he's got like Sputnik, hanging from the ceiling. It's one of 2, and it's real. So the point is like vision and being grand and bold. So I want to close with a couple of slides here. I'm going to go much faster here, but these are important lessons to think about relative to the companies you're building. So this is going to seem a little bit one-on-one, but these are actually profound points about building. So we talked about the dips, right? Knowing and calling and predicting the dips, right? We launch something, you raise money, you invest money, from a division, and you're going to go through grinding failures. Our job is to predict the grinding failures, the dips, so they come in sequences. And so we can tell our teams what dip we're in and then what's coming next. So they know that the wars that we're in and what battles we need to win. It's really important. 2, we're making live-die decisions, right? We are. We're spending real money and time. And it takes so long for data and results to come out. By the time you make those decisions, if you're ready, fire, aim, as opposed to aim, ready, fire, and you can still go fast in both, but it takes 3 months for the actual execution to happen, typically, another 3 months to see the data come through. It's 6 months before you even know the answer. It doesn't take a lot of big decisions over a short period of time to lose your whole business. So the point is that you actually don't have a lot of decisions to make. You have 3 or 4 in the entire company or division's life before it succeeds or fails. Product to market fit. You can spend, this is minimum viable product. This is sort of like Steve Blank, Eric Ries's points, which is working on product theses that survive customer impact and waiting for the distribution data. Not just data, distribution data to come back to you that says, wow, we can distribute this. Typically, the problems are not product problems. They actually were that word right there. It's all about distribution. And if there's one thing the local space has, it has a lot of distribution, right? It's a huge advantage, right? So how do you leverage that? And when you actually do get the strong signals, you have to go all in. This is a very simple chart about decision-making relative to people or businesses or data. The hard line is reality, right? Could be a market reality, could be a product result, could be a person, right? The dash line, the incremental line that heads out there and kind of incrementally goes down and meets the future, that's what I like to, it's kind of a roadkill type of decision makers. And then the hard one, the data one that meets the reality, are the people who make hard decisions once, indexed to the reality, unbiased. I'm sorry you have to die. And the reality is that until you see that gray area in there, you don't realize that that actually is the future. Okay? That's money and time. And when you realize for a startup or your big divisions, your ability to kind of put in that uncomfortable jacket of leadership sometimes means you got to make brutally hard decision once, fast. You don't have time to have that B player on your team who's screwing things up, who's costing you a year for every major mistake they're making. They have to go now. You got to make those hard decisions always and consistently. Otherwise, you're stealing your future and you're stealing the trust of your people that you can lead. This is market friction. This is a paper called Eager Sellers and Stony Buyers. Write it down. It was February 2006, HBR. It'll change your worldview about market friction because you live this life. Today, that triangle that says today is the incumbent in the space, okay? That's where they're spending their money, their time. You are the future. You're on the other side, right? You're inventing a product, okay? There's actually a massive market friction between the incumbent and the competitor. BMW versus Mercedes, Tide versus Cheer, AT&T versus Google search. It doesn't even matter. The point is that there's always an incumbent, always a competitor. The first 3x hurdle represents three things. ROI, I better ROI my competitor. I move $1 from my competitor to me. I have to have better ROI. Makes sense, right? Number 2 is uniqueness. I have to be different. Okay? And number 3 is it's fine if I want $1, but what if I want all of their money and all of their time? Well, then I have to solve the volume problem, right? So the first hurdle is ROI, uniqueness, and volume. It's the reason why Yahoo and MSN, or now Bing, merged. They needed massive keyword volume. They just couldn't compete with liquidity of Google. Makes sense, right? They had to solve that first hurdle. But there's actually a second factor at work. So think about this as it relates to your local marketplace. And the second factor, which is actually compounding, which means that hurdle is stupidly high and harder than you think it is user behavior. Is that people statistically don't change. Just because you have better UI, uniqueness, and volume doesn't mean they're going to move to you at all. So you're out there having the best product in the marketplace, you're like, why are people not switching? Right? Well, behavior. What is behavior? That's an important question to ask. If I can't get them to change behavior, they're never coming to me, even if I have the better product. And so there's only 3 ways to fix that hurdle. The most important ways are, 1 is simplicity, right? Don't make me think. That's a function of design and beauty. It's also functionality. It's the way the iPhone defeated BlackBerry over the last 6-7 years. 50 billion to 5. Well, how did they do that? Well, they figured out what the linchpin was. So there's a question mark. What is the linchpin for you? The linchpin for them was data import. And so having dinner with Eddie Q at Murdoch's home about a year ago, he said, we have 75 engineers who work full-time, all day long, 7 days a week. All their job to do is to solve data import. So when you go on your iPhone and you just add your username and password, it just works. Everything switch over. You ever try that in a BlackBerry or even the new Samsung? It's hard. You got to know SMTP, security, even today. And what do? Brute force. So sometimes magical things are just ones and zeros and lines of codes. But when you solve a linchpin, the entire marketplace comes to you. So what is the linchpin? So the second factor on defeating this friction is the 10x thing I was mentioning. It's making the ROI, uniqueness, and value 10 times better. That's the first part of the presentation. And the last thing is services. Right? Everyone freaks out about services because of overhead and bodies and all that stuff. And I think service is the best customer acquisition tool in the world. Because sometimes it's better just to pick someone up and move them to you. It's the cheapest form you'll ever do because they're going to pay you to be a painkiller. And you're teaching them a new behavior. So what business are you really in? Maybe you're just in the dashboard business. You're just in the tell me the answer business. It's not about marketing at all. It's just having the expression of that. Your job is to show and explain charts, up, down. This means we're hiring, this means we're firing. It might mean 2 different things to a CFO, right? That chart is so valuable when you think about what business you're in and what linchpins are. I encourage you to read the paper. These are revenue curves. In my experience, which is limited and modest, it typically takes 3 years to figure out the business you're in. So you start a company, a new division, and it takes probably 36 months to get a team in place, to learn the space, to even recognize what the billion-dollar opportunity is. Very rarely do you like jump to the billion-dollar curve and be like, "Want to build $1 billion?" It doesn't happen that way. And so, not only does it not happen that way, but when you do have billion-dollar outcomes, it's most often luck. I asked the question, what percentage, of your outcome, of these half the book, which is billionaires, is pure luck? Anybody dare guess what the answer was? Just shout it out, anybody? 70%. Admitted, on video, in their quiet hours, what percentage of your outcome is just pure luck? Like 70%. Call it luck, call it good fortune, blessing, God, whatever you want. The point is that most likely, the outcome you're seeking, that huge outcome, has nothing to do with you. And your job is to form it correctly so it can scale, so that if it does show up, you can be agile enough and smart enough to grab a hold of it. Or it just simply grabs a hold of you. So that's a really important awareness thing, right? So what business are we really in? We're in the business of singles or doubles. Singles are great businesses that make a lot of money and grow pretty linearly, right? Doubles are things that just print money and grow really fast. And the rest is almost not even in your control. I'd argue it's probably not at all in your control. So it really kind of demystifies the whole kind of startup phenomenon. And as you dig into it, it really becomes clear that you're in kind of the wishful lucky business. Get lucky. Build singles or doubles. All right, lastly, I love Stuart Small. I don't know if you guys, he's hilarious. So advice is super cheap, right? So, even this advice is cheap. Like, there's no mentors who can help you make this stuff easier, or boards. Like, you could go form a team of leaders around you who can help you get to the answer faster, but the reality is that you're on your own. Individually, as companies, it's literally just building this stuff. You got to grind it out and learn. So you better get that answers as fast as you can and arm yourself. But I want to share these 4 points. I'm going to close with this, which is more about people. Remember that complexity in all things is people? So there's about 3 or 4 ideas here that this might not be completely relevant, but I think I always share it because this is how I feel about building companies. So one is that we're just incredibly good for, we're just lucky. We should have been born 1,000 years ago, walking 6-7 miles a day for water. Just statistically ridiculous that we get to go build things and travel and take risks. Number 2 is, so that's kind of the grateful point. Number 2 is that don't suffer from the sin of comparison. Don't drive your business or your people into obsessing about the features of your competitor or the press releases. Ignore them. As a CEO leader, you should be sort of ambiently aware of it, but the reality is build your company. Build your team. Build your utterly unique, innate, 10x, radical differentiator monopoly in marketplaces that allow you to do that, okay? Because that's your greatest chance of actually creating something that's a single or double. And so the more you suffer from the sin of comparison, your team, the more corrupt your thinking is going to be, the more things you're going to follow incrementalism. You're going to follow someone else's crappy roadmap into mediocrity, which is most often the case. The people who make the most noise create the littlest value. The third thing is work towards your innate gift. That's the innate point. And the last thing is guard your company from contempt. And I have this rule called the 7-to-1 rule. And big companies are adopting this, which blows my mind, but it's important, which is the fastest way to destroy your team, your company, your marriage is an idea of the things we think but do not say. And the 7-to-1 solves this because it's a ratio of good to bad. We try to do extraordinarily more good than bad in that ratio. And we recognize that people, product, and data fail. As a CEO, I'm going to fail you. I don't want to walk around with Emperor's New Clothes, and I don't want my team not to have that ability to approach me in any environment. But when we do fail, we're going to address it directly. But when we do address it directly, you're not going to leave in a puddle of brokenness. We're going to forgive each other and move on. You have wind at your back. Because it's so stupidly hard to build these companies or create a new business or a new product, you got to have wind at your back. You got to have incredible momentum in your life and the people around you and good fortune. You need a whole company, as Tony says, full of lucky people to make it work because the odds are against you. It's not going to happen. And so that rule actually protects a company in a lot of ways because you need to be able to get things resolved, extinguish them, and move forward. Lastly is, greed's good. Love it. Love making money. And on the other hand, in this marketplace where we're headed and we're in, it's a story war for purpose. And you're actually in an incredibly unique place because you deal with so many companies. You influence so many lives in the outcomes. You put food on the table, you pay for mortgages, you put people in college, right? You're doing really important work. You make companies thrive, small businesses. And that impact and quantum entanglement is very real. And so the closer you link your team and their purpose to greeting what's good, I think you're going to have a much, much higher degree of success. Because that's really what your business is about. Yeah, you want to have, we're in the business of getting as much marketing dollars as we can. Really? That's just oxygen to make that purpose real. And so the faster you align your goals and you think about some of these lenses, I think there will be a couple companies that break out of this space as opposed to incremental, but they do it on a compounding basis. So, thank you.
Thanks, David. So why don't you take a seat? We'll do a few questions before we move on to our next segment. So a question about the current startup environment as you see it. It seems like barriers have really lowered in a lot of ways. Capital requirements, over the last 5 years, especially in the mobile world where kind of building mobile apps have less capital requirements. Technological requirements in some ways. You have tools like Amazon Web Services and things like that. So is this a good thing in that it's giving a more fertile environment, or are there bad parts about it in that, less than vetted companies are kind of coming out of the woodwork, and you see a lot of pivots for that reason? Are the barriers too low, I guess is my question.
Listen, so pivots are good, right? So let's describe real quickly what a pivot actually is, in my opinion, right? So a pivot would be, my idea, my company is a heat-seeking missile going to a target, right? A pivot is the navigation of the landscape on the way to that target.
Got it.
So if I move the target, I got a different business. But if I navigate my, missile all the way there, you're kind of stupid not to, right?
Right.
So people think pivot's bad. You're an idiot not to pivot, right? So the point you're addressing actually is about just the volume of ideas.
Yeah.
I think volume ideas is very good. What's bad about volume ideas is actually keeping zombie ideas alive.
Yeah.
And so the danger in that is actually the high quality ideas are starved of talent.
Yep.
So if you can concentrate talent on a highly vetted method of selecting them, the ones that actually create the economic oxygen, then you have a great chance of building an ecosystem to be successful. Just imagine yourself describing to your kids 20 years from now what you did to create your wealth. Yeah. They're not going to be amazed or surprised at all. It'll be completely obvious. So get over yourself. Create something that creates economic oxygen, create value, and concentrate talent.
Mm-hmm. Now, the volume question also comes into play in the next question, then we'll move on to the next segment. But, this question might be answered by everything you just showed us. But speaking as an investor, you're an angel investor. What is some of your investment criteria, kind of with that hat on?
I'm not very good at it, but it's very ironic and totally classic that all my biggest bets have all been like with the most famous people and have all failed the fastest. But the best bets I've made were because I've made investments in teams that were like watchmakers.
Sure.
They were obsessed. They go back to the innate point. Mm-hmm. They just they were born to do this. Sure. Whatever rabbit hole they're going down. So I spent a lot of time thinking about my team and the things I invest in around the innate question. And looking, in their past, I asked two great interview questions. One is, what about in your last job did people most misunderstand about you? Yep. It's a great question, by the way, because they'll tell you why everyone thought this was a jerk or not, right? Right. And they tell you, you'll kind of get an idea of their innate. And the second one is on a scale of 1 to 10, which is, how lucky are you a person and why? Yep. And they'll start to describe these things in a way that they ask all the illegal HR questions that gets around them. And they'll tell you, and you can start to get an idea around what their true gifts are. And the faster these companies can indicate those and concentrate the talent, whether it be a single investment or team, you get to the answer fast.
That's great. So we're going to hear a lot more from you because you're going to stick with us.